Hello and welcome. We are waiting for a few more people to join us, so we'll be starting in just a minute. Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us. We'll be starting in just a few minutes. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. We are just gathering. We'll start in about one more minute. Hello, good evening. Welcome. Welcome to We Know More Than You Think, advice from youth to adults about how to talk about sex. Tonight is part of a series of virtual panel discussions sponsored by Huckleberry Youth Programs. I'm Doug Stiles, the Executive Director and CEO of Huckleberry Youth Programs. As you know, Huckleberry Youth Programs has been providing incredible services to young people in the Bay Area for over 55 years, educating, inspiring, and supporting young adults and their families. And we cannot provide these programs without the incredible support of people like you. So if you're inspired by this evening's panel discussion, you can donate through our website, www.huckleberryyouth.org, or you can text HYP to 41444. And tonight's gifts will be matched up to $25,000 by the generous donation of the Carol and Peter Friedman Foundation. So again, thank you for joining us this evening. We have an incredible panel for you to listen to and even ask some questions at the end if you have them. And now it gives me incredible pleasure to introduce to you Jackson Bowman, the moderator and host of this evening. Jackson?
Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to We Know More Than You Think, advice from teens to adults on how to talk about sex. Tonight's panel is part of Huckleberry's year-long celebration of 30 years of providing adolescent health services in San Francisco and Marin counties. Our celebration will culminate at our annual event, which will be Saturday, October 1st from 11:30 to 3 at the Peacock Gap Golf Club in San Rafael. To register for the event, please text 30th anniversary to 91999 or register on our website at huckleberryyouth.org. The purpose of tonight's panel is to give our panel of teens and our senior health educator a chance to discuss what teens are looking for when it comes to conversations about sexual and reproductive health. We hope that what you learn from our panelists will help support you as you prepare to lead these kinds of conversations with your young people. In a few minutes, we will introduce ourselves, and then we'll move directly into our panel discussion, which will last approximately 45 minutes. Following the panel, there will be 15 minutes for audience-submitted questions. You can submit your questions by using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Once your question is submitted, it will be reviewed by our behind-the-scenes team and then forwarded on to me. As a heads up, we are recording tonight's event. If you would like to view this panel again, or you would like to share it with a friend, partner, or colleague, you will be able to find it later this week on Huckleberry social media. I will introduce myself to start. I am Jackson Bowman. I use he and him pronouns. I am the former Director of Health Services for Huckleberry Youth Programs, and I've been working with teens and young adults around the issues of health for the last 16 years. So now let's meet our panelists. I am going to go ahead and start with Alba Alvarado.
Good evening, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. I love seeing all these familiar names of all of you who are attending. Thank you so much for taking the evening to come and listen and watch these amazing young folks give us once in a lifetime advice, honestly. My name is Alba Alvarado. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm currently the senior health educator in the San Francisco health education team, located in the Heights. I have about 8 years of experience teaching sex education, sharpening my sex ed skills, and I'm just very excited to give y'all some insight and really just give everyone the opportunity to listen to these super bright and amazing young folks and the advice they have for us today.
Thank you, Alba. I'm going to go ahead and ask Angelina to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Angelina Sorensen. I'm 17 years old, and I'm a junior at Lake Wilmerding High School. And I'm really just looking forward to talking about like gender and sexuality in terms of sexual and reproductive health, as I think it's something that's not as talked about. And I'm just really excited to be here with everyone.
Thank you, Angelina. I am now going to ask Desiree to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name's Desiree. I go by she, they, him, and I'm a 15-year-old sophomore that's from Independence High School, transferred to Balboa, and I'm really excited to give y'all advice on how to be supportive and like give, guidance to your young adult.
Awesome. Thank you, Desiree. And finally, I'm going to go to Asar.
Hello, my name is Asar Honorable. I am also a junior at Lake Wilmerding High School. I'm 16. I use he, him pronouns. And I'm really excited to finally get to, give the advice that I've always wanted to tell certain teachers and adults in my life.
And we're excited to get that advice. Thank you so much for introducing yourself. Thank you for being on our panel. Thank you to everyone in our audience. And let's go ahead and get our panel started. Okay. So what I want to start with talking about is like the talk, right? So actually, I'm going to ask my first question to Desiree. So Desiree, why do adults have a responsibility to start conversations about sexual and reproductive health instead of waiting for the young people in their lives to ask questions?
That's a really good question, Jackson. It's really important for adults to like start the conversation at a young age, probably as soon as elementary school. So we could know that like it's okay to be talking about bodies and sex, and we're able to come to you and be able to talk to you without being scared. And also letting us know that things are gonna happen, like puberty and your body's changing and everything's changing. It's like we aren't gonna be less scared or just like surprised when it does happen, because I remember when I was in 4th grade, I remember I got my first period and I did not know what puberty was. So your homegirl thought she was dying in the bathroom. I didn't tell my family because obviously I thought something was going on and something was wrong with me. Until in 5th grade, I learned that like the earliest a girl could get their period is 8 years old. So like when I hear like my aunt tell her 8-year-old daughter that, oh yeah, you're gonna get your period, this is gonna happen, I feel really happy because like she's being a really good role model and being straightforward with her. And that's why parents need to be also straightforward with their young adult when it comes to bodies and sex. Like just coming towards your young adult saying like, oh, I know your body's changing. If you have any questions, you could like ask me, don't be scared. And also I know like the topic of bodies, sex, and just like everything changing with puberty is gonna be really uncomfortable. But the goal is to just, get out of your comfort zone, talk about it, and make it your comfort zone so you end up a cycle of awkwardness.
Awesome. Yes, let's end that cycle of awkwardness. I love that. Asar, why do you think adults should be initiating these kinds of conversations?
Yeah, I really agree with what Desiree said about letting us know that you're open to having these conversations. I would describe it as like a green light. So being the adult, the authority figure in our lives, we're looking to you for a lot of things. Can I get a ride somewhere? Yes. Can I have some ice cream? No. So like, it's not that much different when talking about sexual and reproductive health. We're still looking to you for that acceptance, not only of the conversation, but of the fact that, we are getting older and are likely going to have experiences that directly relate to what we learn in sexual and reproductive health. And an example of how a green light could look, it could look many different ways. But for me, it was when my mom came to me and was just straight up like, if you have any questions, come to me. I will answer them honestly and openly. And it let me know that she was a resource herself, but also she gave me external resources like books and videos that I could access on my own to do research on my own. And that showed me that she trusted me, not only in kind of to an extent facilitating my own learning, but also trusted me in being able to handle this information and handle these facts of getting older. And I think it was really important that on top of giving resources, she let me know that she herself was a resource. Because per se, if you only, maybe leave some books at the end of your young person's bed, it might seem like a deflection of the responsibility of starting the conversation. Like, don't come to me. I don't want to hear about all that. But, read the book. It'll tell you everything you need to know, so don't only give resources, but also let your young person know that you yourself are a resource and that you are there for them to answer their questions and be with them on that journey.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Asar. What about you, Angelina? What do you think?
Yeah, I really like what Asar said about like the balance between having like time with the teen themselves and then giving them the resources. I think a really important piece of this is also the adults kind of, I feel like you guys as adults have a responsibility to be well educated on the subject of sexual and reproductive health before you enter these conversations. And so, although the ideas behind like gender and sexuality are changing rapidly in the age of like social media, getting your info from like Facebook or YouTube is probably not the best way to go. So I have a little example. My grandma, during the beginning of COVID, she called my mom and she's like, "Oh my God, the government created COVID. Like, oh, this is like groundbreaking news." And and I just thought it was so funny. She saw it on YouTube because her friend like just sent this video to her and she thought it was so real. And I think it's so important to realize that the sensational news stories often use like real information with fake information and they mix it all in to make it sound as legit as possible. And so just please don't be my grandma in this situation. Also, just check for sources that like don't include bias or misogyny or homophobia, racism, that kind of stuff. It can be as simple as looking for like the .org or the .edu tag. And some websites that I've personally found helpful for sexual and reproductive health are Planned Parenthood, the Trevor Project, Sex Ed with DB, and SF, the LGBTQ Center. And even the CDC can be helpful as well. And just a reminder to try to have these conversations in a like safe, comfortable environment, kind of what Asar was saying. If you sense that the teen isn't ready in any way to have this conversation, just like tell them, "Hey, I'm here. Like, I'm here to talk if and when you have questions." And then the last piece, I think it's super important to acknowledge like societal and cultural taboos around the subject. Some teens will have grown up in like a predisposed, open environment where conversations about sex is like, very normalized, while others, like my mother, for example, she grew up in a very like religious Mexican household, may not. So this means just acknowledging that your teen may feel uncomfortable, and it's not because of anything you've said or done, but because like of the society's stigma behind this subject. And even after all this advice, even after this whole panel, you feel like I still don't know, like I still am struggling to talk to my teen. Just know that it's super important that you share your knowledge of sexual and reproductive health with your teen, because having these conversations will make sure that the next generation is going to grow up to be well educated and then thus is able to enjoy a healthy, and if they choose to be if they choose to be sexually active, a pleasurable life.
Amazing. Thank you so much, all of you. Thank you so much. Okay, so we know that the talk conversation can be scary. It can be scary for teens and it can be scary for adults, right? So, Asar, I'm going to ask you a question. What is something adults can do to normalize open conversations about sexual and reproductive health with the young folks in their lives?
Yeah, I would say, the name of the game is just start as early as possible to really build that open connection. It's not something that is just going to happen, that you can snap into existence. You have to work on it and build it. So I wouldn't say there's like a perfect age range for starting this conversation. I would just say whenever you're a young person maybe like makes a comment or asks a question or shows interest in learning about sexual and reproductive health, that's your golden opportunity. Them showing, their interest. That's the moment when you should, answer honestly and openly and without an adverse reaction. Because, a moment when a lot of young people start to believe that this is a conversation that they can't have, or that's, not okay or taboo or hush hush about, is when we're young and we make a comment or ask a question and we're met with silence or redirection, or even telling a story like the storks, for example. It seems, innocent enough, but when we do eventually learn that, that wasn't true, it might cause us to think, why would they lie about that? Or, tell a different story about that. And it makes us think, maybe this is something that I shouldn't be talking about, or that I shouldn't come to them about, and will make us, turn in a little bit. And that's not what we want, of course. So you just really have to show that you are there and you are available, and that they really can ask you anything. And over time, that will build an open relationship where everyone feels safe to engage with one another and have conversation and ask questions.
Awesome. I'm just going to keep on saying awesome, apparently, over and over again. Thank you so much, Asar. Angelina, what about you? What are some ways that you feel like we could be normalizing these kinds of conversations?
Yeah, I have a very good example of this, like normalizing conversations. I have a really distinct memory when I was kind of like what Asar was saying, given the green light to talk about sex and reproductive health. And I distinctly remember I was in third grade. So I was about like 8 years old. And I remember that my dad and I were walking from my school to my brother's baseball practice. And now that I'm looking back on the situation, I'm like, this walk could not have been more than like half an hour. But in the moment, it felt like it was lasting for so long because I was learning so much during this conversation. Anyways, um, we were walking through the Castro during the beginning of our walk. So the Castro is like a very explicit gay pride district of San Francisco, for those of you who may not know. And I noticed a sex shop window display, and I think there was like a pink dildo in the window, and I was like, "What, Dad? What is this? Like, what is that funny shaped thing in the window? I'm so confused." And my dad answered that question, and then it just kind of spiraled into a conversation about sex and how babies are made and what pleasure is and all this kind of stuff. And because I was in third grade and I hadn't received any like formal lessons all about this yet, it was all new to me. So my dad would explain something like why sex toys exist, and then I would ask what sex was, and then he would explain that, and then I had another question, and they would respond again, and like so on and so forth. And I would say that he was a little surprised when the conversation started. And he definitely chuckled a few times during his explanations. But we all like live and we learn. We're all getting better at having these conversations every time we experience them. But he was never like visibly uncomfortable, which I really appreciate. And the fact that this conversation came up completely naturally, he didn't have to be like, Angelina, today we are going to talk about sex. Um, it just made me feel like very comfortable talking to him. And this conversation was also, I think, integral in my forming of my perspective that sex and sexual health is just another normal part of life, which is something that I know a lot of people would disagree with me on. And I feel fortunate to have gained that perspective because of my sex education. And I think I would say that my sex education started that day in third grade. So, yeah.
That's great. Congratulations to your dad as well. That's an awesome example to have set for you. Desiree, I'm going to round things off with you. What are your thoughts about normalizing these kinds of conversations?
Well, I think like normalizing conversations happen over time. And when you start talking about your body changing at like a young age, like it's less awkward, less uncomfortable, and both people know what they're talking about. Like my aunt is like is a really good role model in my life because like I remember I was like such a foolish teenager. I'm joking, but I am. I'm still foolish. But at that time I was having I had really severe anxiety, and I remember like telling myself, I was like, oh my God, my period's late. I think I'm pregnant, even though I didn't have penetrative sex. But then I think I'm pregnant. And when I tried to calm myself down and be like, no, that can't happen. It's like literally no possibility. Like you're being dumb. My anxiety was like, nah, homegirl, we're gonna do this. You're pregnant. And so I remember coming up to my aunt and I was like so hesitant to talk to her. And I was like, so like, don't be mad at me. Don't be mad at me, but like this and this happened. And what I told her, she did laugh at me, but not in a way like it was like, oh yeah, you're stupid. Like, why are you thinking about that? It's like she's laughing at me because it's like, oh, that's not how it works, honey. And so despite her like still like giving me reassurance and everything, I kind of like I still nervously asked her, like, oh, can we get like a test and da da da. And she was like, yeah, if that makes you feel better, then yeah, we could go ahead. And so when it comes to my aunt, I never really felt dumb, small, or anything for asking questions or trying to figure out things like other adults when I asked her, like, oh, well, we're just going to ignore your feelings. Um, so this makes her a really good listener, and it made me want to share more with her than with someone that would overstep my boundaries.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for sharing that with us. And and great job to your aunt as well. What a great way of meeting you where you are. Okay, so we know that teens have a choice, right? Like about who they engage with around sexual and reproductive health, who they have these conversations with. And ultimately, we want them to choose us, right? We want to be the people that they come to. So, Asar, in your opinion, what traits are young people looking for in someone you would have these kinds of conversations with?
Yeah, I would categorize, the conversation into two parts, like the setup and then the actual conversation. For the setup, kind of like Angelina was saying, it shouldn't be like super formal. We're having this talk. But also, if it doesn't come up naturally, then you should have a little bit of an area for like a heads up. So, you wouldn't want to just barge in on them like, hey, whatever you're doing, pause it, sex talk right now. Like that would be a little abrasive, like, wait, what? I was watching Netflix. I was not prepared for this at all. And then on the other hand of that, being like, on the 21st, we're going to sit down and have a serious discussion could seem a little too formal and daunting, like a big, scary thing. So, you might not even need like a 24-hour period, just like if you're sending them off to school, like, when you come back, I think we should have a discussion about, you getting older and what that might entail. So, something like that gives them a little bit of heads up, but not so much that it seems daunting and scary, but also not so little that it's like, where is this coming from? Also, when you're in the conversation, you don't want to make it seem super like formal and scary and like, what is this crazy new bad world that I'm going to be going into? But, just relaying the information in a casual, normal way. I would say also, you don't need to like perform it per se. And I have an example of this. A teacher of mine, in one-on-one discussions would be really, relaxed and casual and normal. And then when regarding the class, it was like a completely different character. And we talk about penises and vaginas, and there'd be weird inflections on all sorts of words. And, it just kind of made everyone in the class just take a few steps back. Like, we're not in a, Sesame Street episode. This isn't a children's show. You don't need to perform that much. You can be as casual and as calm and relaxed as in a normal conversation, because it is just another conversation. And if you approach it in that way, then we'll pick up off of that energy and, respond more positively, and it'll make us feel relaxed and more okay with the situation. And then we can start to engage and ask you our questions that we have and feel more comfortable having the conversation.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Asar. I actually also want to hear from Alba about this. So Alba, what do you think teens are looking for when kind of choosing people to have these kinds of conversations with?
Yeah, from my experience, the best educators honestly are the best listeners, which is awesome because all of you who are here today listening to these young folks are doing exactly that, is putting the youth's voices first and being open listeners and really wanting to take in their feedback. So kudos to all of you for that. And that's exactly where you need to start. And I would say something that really showed me this was an experience I had this past school year. One of my best experiences actually was at an all-girls Catholic school. And this may be the last place you would think I would have such a positive experience, but that just goes to show how it's super important to let go of our biases, because you never know where you'll have a great experience and really learn from the students or from the folks there. But anyways, I was teaching anatomy and we were going through the internal and the external parts of the penis, the vulva, vagina, and the uterus. And we were going through it and I was walking them through the external anatomy. And then these girls stopped me and they just start yelling like, "There's 3 holes in the vagina." And I thought it was so sweet. It was just like so nice to see their excitement. And it made me smile and also really touched my heart. And they just explained to me that no one had ever walked them through anatomy in such an honest and open way. And they were just so excited to be learning about how their body functioned, the reality of the different holes and all the moving parts to how their genitals function and everything in between, how they stay healthy. And I was just really happy to be able to give them that experience and be able to earn their trust, because it is a really vulnerable thing for a lot of people to talk about, and to be able to say, I had no idea this was going on with my body. And that just goes to show how being honest and open, exactly what the young folks are telling us today, has immediate results, right? It's super rewarding because it just shows us how honestly life-changing and impactful these conversations can be when you're providing young folks with this honest conversation. And it really allows us to cater to the group, their needs and what they want to know when it comes to sex ed. So an additional example to that, same group of students, we were talking about like your sexual debut or the first time you have sex and how to make that decision. And they introduced me to this concept of soul ties, which you should definitely look up if you don't know what it is. But it has something to do with people who are sexually active and intimate with each other. And I could have easily dismissed this because it's not maybe a part of my religion, or I'm not religious or something of that sort. But instead, I was really curious with them. I wanted to unpack that with them and learn from them and understand that this religious aspect is a really important part of their sex education. And I really do believe that made me a more informed and a better educator. It just goes to show another piece of listening and doing my own research. So overall, just be ready to adapt, be prepared to learn just the way that you want them to learn from you. Treat them as equals, and you're on the right track to being someone that they're going to be excited to talk to.
Thank you so much for your insight, Alba. I really appreciate that. And actually, speaking of assumptions, that dovetails perfectly into our next question. I'm actually going to start with Angelina for this question. So Angelina, why is it important for adults to avoid making assumptions about young people's like gender or sexuality when having conversations about sexual and reproductive health?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I just first want to say I think that like the concept that gender is fluid or that gender is like a spectrum is something that many teens of my generation have grown up surrounded by. And so even though this idea or this concept may be a little new to you, or maybe you don't agree with the idea, just understand that like it exists and it's here. And the way that people view gender and sexuality is constantly evolving, like I said before. And so basically I think it's important to understand that just first and foremost, assuming anything about a person is like disrespectful. Like it is just disrespectful. And so obviously this goes for gender and sexuality as well, regardless of the person's age. However, for teens, it can be especially like hurtful, I guess, because it can feel very invalidating for them and it can shut them down to the possibility of maybe exploring where they lie on that gender spectrum. It reinforces the idea that like no matter how they present themselves to the world, adults will continue to view them as a certain gender or sexuality. And it's like, wow, like no matter how hard I try, it will never be enough to convince this person that like I don't present that way or that I don't, that's not my gender, for example. And so change and fluidity is also affected by so many factors like the environment, relationship, upbringing, all this stuff. And so it's completely normal and I think in my opinion deserves to be like change deserves to be at least respected if not accepted by everyone. And I know that a lot of folks from my generation, especially in San Francisco, are particularly good at this because that like accepting environment is something we've sort of grown up with our whole lives. And therefore, I think it's important for adults to make a real effort to try to embody that acceptance of change as well, even if it's something you're less familiar with. And then my last point is just assuming one's gender implies that you're not really listening to them. Kind of tying back to what I was saying before, just disrespectful. It assumes that you don't really know who the person is and you don't really want to you don't care about what they're saying. And this creates kind of like a one-sided dynamic to the conversation where the teen is the only like quote unquote student. And I think it's really important during these conversations that everyone is learning from each other and that everyone is like the student. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that is so true. Thank you so much for that, Angelina. Desiree, what about you? Why do you think adults should avoid making these kinds of assumptions?
Thank you for the question, Jackson. Well, like Angelina said, like we're like constantly like, figuring ourselves out and like it's something that doesn't end even if you're like 30 years old, excuse me, have your own house and you think you got your life together, but really like you're still trying to figure out what you're gonna do the next day. And gender and sexuality is going to be a part of it. So adults assuming someone's gender or sexuality could be very like damaging and like very hurtful. And while we're still trying to like figure out what we are and like who we are as a person, and it also like makes us feel cornered. And I believe, like in my opinion, in my strong opinion, that's not how support looks like. And also like how Angelina said, it's also disrespectful and straight up rude to be assuming anything about anyone. Like luckily, like we're lucky to be in a state like California because like talking about pronouns, sexuality, gender, intersectionality is like appreciated and accepted. Like I'm gender fluid by pure feminine, and I don't just use like she, her pronouns, I use all pronouns. And when like a mentor, parent, teacher, or anyone just like older than me that has authority, like acknowledges this and like respects it, I feel like they're respecting me and also acknowledging me as a person. And I know that like it's gonna be confusing because like, how you might also not agree with it because like, kids like our generation we grow up in like this like all open, gender inclusive like spectrum and everything. And it's okay if you don't know things. You can, or like, that's why there's resources that are from queer activists, allies, or just like communities, or even like, programs like Lyric, Huckleberry, Planned Parenthood, the Trevor Project, and way other more, like that could help you and like understand like gender and like sexuality. Like you don't need to know everything, but you have to be open minded to the idea. And also being more gender inclusive shows us that you care for us as a person and as a young adult.
Yes, so much, all about that listening, all about the respect. Such an important way of showing respect to the people around us is by honoring who they are. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Okay, so we've been talking sort of broadly about like adults, but I want to shift the conversation a little bit more towards talking specifically about teachers. We know that teachers carry a lot of the weight when it comes to these kinds of conversations, and we also know that how teachers teach has such a huge impact on how students will learn, right? So Angelina, I'm going to direct this question to you. The question is, what is something that your health teacher did that made learning about sexual and reproductive health more interesting?
Ooh, such a juicy question. I love this question. Just so you guys know, if I were a little reminder, I go to Lick Wilmerding High School. Asar does as well. We had different teachers for our health curriculum, but overall, Lick has a very, very comprehensive, wonderful sex ed curriculum that I wish was available to more teens. And one thing that stood out to me during my time in the class was like the project-based learning aspect of the class. Not only is it fun and it forces you to be creative, but the project-based learning is also a really important tool for visual and kinesthetic learners to, use their hands, visualize things, and it grants our students the opportunity to work and learn as a group. So it's a lot of group work as well. To give you some examples of projects for our final sex ed project, we did, you could choose whatever sex ed topic you were most interested and comfortable presenting, and you could present it in any way you wanted to. So, for example, one girl crocheted a vulva with all the different parts in different colors, so you can see like a little diagram, because she loved crochet. Another group made like a Chutes and Ladders game that was called STIs and Condoms, where you would collect condoms if you landed on the right space, and then you would climb the ladders and slide down the STIs unless you had a condom. I thought that was really cool. My group, we filmed and edited a baking video about healthy relationships, in which we compared every aspect of a healthy relationship with an ingredient of banana bread. So in the end of the video, we made like healthy relationship banana bread, basically. On top of the project-based learning also is like, we covered in that class, we covered a lot of what you may call like unconventional sex ed topics. So we covered like the rape culture pyramid, pornography literacy, stuff like that. And my advice to teachers who may want to teach these subjects and you maybe don't know where to start, or you're hesitant on how to broach the subject in class because it's not like the traditional sex ed curriculum, is to look for educational resources online, like videos, like pre-made slideshows. There's a lot of stuff online to share with your class, because this removes the added element of difficulty of needing to create original content for each lesson. And also, I would highly recommend facilitating discussions, because, like I said before, often you will learn things from your students, and you'll be surprised at how much the teens have to say, like this panel, for example, about these topics. And discussion really just creates a perfect space where youth can learn from each other and can learn from you at the same time.
Yes. Oh my God, I can't wait for healthy relationship banana bread. I'm also going to give a very small plug for Huckleberry's Health Education team. If you're a teacher and you are looking for some resources and you would like some help with teaching these kinds of subjects in your classroom, we have health educators who are ready, standing by now to come in and help out with that as well. Asar, I know, so Angelina said you also go to Lick. You had a different teacher. What was something that your teacher did that made learning about sexual and reproductive health interesting?
Yeah, I did also go to Lick, still do go to Lick. And also just to reiterate, like she was saying, I do feel really grateful for being able to go there and receive the sex education that we received, because it was really good and really eye-opening. And specifically the part that I enjoyed most, that I thought was really impactful, was teaching us not just, the anatomy and science part, but also the people part and the history of, access to actual sexual and reproductive care, and how that has been tricky in this country. Some of the topics that we went over were, for example, the history of abortion rights and people's access to it, how the US handled the AIDS epidemic. And there are even different less heavy facts in there, like, for example, the first condom was actually made of animal intestines. So I'll never forget that one. That is fried in there. But, different cool and interesting facts like that helped us engage a lot more in the class and take it a lot more seriously, especially with the heavier topics. It helped us take the class more seriously, because I feel like it is an easy class to possibly, get a little less engaged in and maybe see as just, something that doesn't really matter that much. But, teaching us about people's real life experience with getting treatment and, care related to sexual and reproductive health shows how serious of a topic it really is, and helped ground the class in something that we could empathize with and connect with and really care about, so, maybe even some of my peers, or maybe even myself, might choose to now, with that knowledge that the school gave us, go into a field where we can directly, address these problems and make them better. And, it gave us another layer of meaningful knowledge and helped us really appreciate the class. And I thought it was really cool.
Thank you so much. And, I think you really bring up something that is so important, which is to ground these conversations in history, to ground them in context, and to really make this a well-rounded discussion. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Alba, I'm going to ask you a similar question. What advice do you have for teachers who are looking to create a comfortable environment to have conversations about sexual and reproductive health?
Yeah, I could honestly go on and on and on and on trying to answer this question. So I'm really going to try to just highlight what I think are maybe the more important pieces that can be taken away today. First of all, exactly what Asar and Angelina are saying. They're hitting the nail right on the head. A pat on the back to us as educators. I'm glad that we're doing things that you guys like. But keeping the workshops interesting, and engaging, making them discussion based. Nobody wants to sit in a 90-minute lecture with someone just talking at them the whole time, or a lot of people prefer not to do that. And just relevant to their lives. So, an example of something super historical that recently happened was the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And it was really important for us to bring that into the classroom. And the students actually brought it to the classroom anyways. They wanted to talk about it. And we were able to connect that to protection methods or our birth control workshop, and really connect why it feels super important right now to have this kind of education with everything going on in our country. So shout out to y'all for giving great advice. And again, keeping it interesting, connecting it to y'all's day-to-day lives, honestly, all of our lives. When it comes to the actual space, the first thing that we always do, acknowledging that we are guests in that classroom and we want to set up this space in a safe way, is setting community agreements, which we call an innocent set of positive rules to keep the classroom, engaging, supportive, positive, like I said. So we do the regular things, respect each other, don't yuck my yum. We give a content warning. One thing that we do that we think is really important is we make sure to tell students no, we are guests there who are never going to make assumptions about any of y'all's experiences or assumptions based on any questions you may be asking. We just want to invite curiosity and give y'all education, understanding that everyone comes from different backgrounds, and just reminding them that regardless if you want to be sexually active, if not, if you are, if you haven't, whatever, it's really important information to have regardless of all that experience. And this, you can really see it open up students to feel like there's less judgment going on and be more comfortable asking questions or even being silly with the conversation, which can be a really good time if done the right way. And it really helps to also tell them that we're there to learn from them as much as hopefully they can take something away from our workshop, which really helps to break down that hierarchy of, you know, authority versus student. It really helps to even things out even a little bit. And remember that, again, like in every conversation you have in the classroom, outside the classroom, if you're a parent, you can really learn something from young folks about everything. And then lastly, I would argue the most important piece is knowing when and how to shut down discrimination and dehumanization that may arise within the classroom. So if you ever hear something, a side comment, an inappropriate giggle, I really recommend to never ignore it, because ignoring a racist, homophobic comment can communicate to the class that that's not important to you to shut down. And that's the last thing that we want to do as supportive educators. And there's really a way, I think, for students to call them in, not call them out, and hear a comment and say, interesting comment, why do you think that's true? Or where did you hear that? Let's talk about it. Or just say, hey, that's not okay to say because it can hurt people in this way. Let's unpack that as a class and really turn it into a learning experience. I personally always assume the best intentions in young people because they're really still trying to figure out their own values. And, you know, our role is really to be a guide for them in helping them critically think about the things that they may be hearing at home or on TV, seeing on social media, or, you know, even in the halls of school.
Yes, thank you so much for your expertise, Alba. So I'm going to move to our last question before we do audience questions. Right now, we actually do not have any audience questions, so I just want to throw that out to our audience. If you have anything that you'd like to ask our panelists, you can do that. Just click on the Q&A button that's at the bottom of your screen, and we will sort through those. It does look like we've had some interaction in the Q&A and some really good conversation, so I just want to thank the folks who have posted in there. And if anybody wants to ask questions, we are open to those questions. Okay, so we know that parents and guardians and a lot of times also teachers sometimes have their own thoughts or some of their own feelings when it comes to the topic of discussing teens and sex and whether teens should be having sex and all of that kind of stuff. So Desiree, I'm going to ask you this question. What advice would you give to adults whose beliefs or discomfort are getting in the way of them providing sexual and reproductive health information to young people in their lives?
That's a really, really good question. Well, I know that we all come from different backgrounds, and like that alone would just include like religion, culture, and etc. And this could already affect how like some people feel about talking about sex. Some people, excuse me, parents, sorry, believe that their young adults shouldn't be learning about sex education in schools. Adults have to keep in mind that like we are naturally curious and sometimes we act on our own feelings. I used to live in Texas, and teachers over there aren't actually required to teach you like comprehensive sex education. They're more about the idea about they're more about ramming the idea, sorry, about abstinence and telling you not to have sex and just not giving out helpful information that we're gonna need. It leaves us in the dark and it sets us up for unplanned pregnancies and higher chance of getting STIs. It also adds to the stigma on bodies and sex, and it makes us feel like we shouldn't talk about it, and it's a hush hush topic. With everything going on with our country, like Roe v. Wade, like we need to talk about these topics, and we need to be talking about like sex and reproductive rights. And like, since this is happening, it's more important to be informed with this. Like, I had a sex teacher or health teacher that, despite her beliefs, like being like, oh, I don't believe like you guys should be having sex at your age, she still knew that it was like critical for us to at least be in like educated on these topics about like STDs, protections, and everything. Even though she was like, I believe y'all should be doing this, but like, if that, I'm gonna teach you still, you know? And just from her, like, I learned so much stuff that like I probably wouldn't have known like in the long run. Like, I learned about a female condom that you insert like inside, and like TMI, but like also pubic lights that like I would have never knew. Like, but like I was saying, we are naturally curious and we are going to explore ourselves. And it's also more important to be concerned about our safety and us being informed with STDs or STIs. Instead of focusing on if you agree with us or like if you believe that what we do is right, it just makes us feel more like uncomfortable and also ashamed for just like doing something natural to us, natural to our bodies. Adults have to keep in mind that like we as young people have our own mind and our own ideas, and just like making us feel shame is just super emotionally scarring for just being curious. We're going to be adults eventually, and sex education is just preparing us for the aspects of adulthood. Whether we are sexually active or not, it's an important piece of knowledge to have.
Wow. Desiree, I just want to say I am so glad that you had this teacher who was able to put aside her discomfort and really prioritize a comprehensive sex education. It sounds like you really took away a lot from a classroom that maybe, you know, you could have not had that experience. So I'm so glad that you did. And it really goes to show what an important action that is for adults to make. Alba, I'm going to give you the last word about this topic. So from the perspective of an educator, what advice do you have for folks who might feel conflicted about having these kinds of conversations?
I think that, you know, this can definitely seem like a tricky question, but I definitely think there's a positive way to go about it. I would say at the end of the day, it's important to remember that each and every one of us deserves and has the right to develop and uphold and believe our own beliefs, right? Our jobs as educators is never to go into a classroom and come in super intensely and tell students, wear condoms, don't do drugs, do as I say, which can be a really scary, like I said, intense experience. Regardless of what our beliefs are, that's going to push people away, right? It's just about giving them a well-rounded education, like we keep saying, in an honest and direct way that respects each student's bodily autonomy and their personhood as an individual who can critically think and make decisions for themselves. That's basically what harm reduction is all about. If you don't know what harm reduction is, I really encourage y'all to go out and just really dive into it, because it's a really, really amazing social justice framework for health and everything in between, honestly. Overall, though, it's really about respect for someone's ability to make decisions about what they know they need for their own bodies and their own lifestyles, and removing any force or manipulation in whatever, you know, that decision may be for them. So, you know, when we start talking, or if we start talking to students in a way where we are all knowing powers, just because we're older and have more experience, it can communicate to them that maybe there isn't a level of respect there that they want, which clearly they've said here today, right? They want to be respected, they want to be listened to. And when we go in powerfully like that, it kind of throws that out the window. So just reminding yourself, again, keep that openness and be a listener. And you're entitled to your beliefs, right? But so are they as people, like I said, who can think for themselves. You know, as we've heard today, that's something that young people are very aware of, is knowing when they're not being respected or when they're being babied. I think as for parents, though, I don't know what it's like to be a parent. I don't have kids. I'm not raising children, which I know is a challenge of its own. but I do know what it's like to be a kid being raised by parents who are trying their best, but maybe don't know how to navigate these kind of conversations. And for a while, my parents were very intense, and I do remember shutting down a little bit and wanting to step away from those conversations. And I think that can be really helpful to remember what it was like to be a teenager yourself and have these conversations with your parents. Remember the people that made you want to open up and trust, and remember the people who maybe made you want to roll your eyes and be like, Mom, come on, right? That's not the experience we want to give our young folks. So really at the end of the day, being a good educator or an open parent is just being able to be vulnerable. You can hold on to your beliefs, but also let the young folks develop their own, really uplift their curiosity, their eagerness, their personhood, give them respect, and make them feel as if their opinions, their wants, their needs are valid. Just remember, you're their guide into the world, but you're not there to tell them how to go through the world. Just guide them, give them a little nudge to figure things out on their own and help them develop their own beliefs.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Alba. I love that. Okay, so we got a few questions from our audience, so we're going to move on there. There's one that I'm actually just going to, I think, address myself. And the question is, what was the framework called? And I think what you're talking about is harm reduction, is the framework that Alba was just speaking about. So harm reduction is a principle of looking at behavior that can cause harm and sort of how do we negotiate our health in relationship to these kinds of behaviors. And it can, range from a lot of things. It's a framework that I think started with folks who are having conversations around substance use, but it's the principles of it really expand into all kinds of decisions that have to do with our health. So take a second to look up harm reduction. It's a really amazing framework. Okay, so this is a great question. I think I might know where it comes from, and I think all of our panelists are going to have something to say about it. So the question is, what if your teen will not talk to you about sex? They don't want to talk to you about sex. They're mortified when you try to talk to them about sex. So how do you kind of read those cues? Like, how do you sort of like negotiate that when, I don't know, you're not ready, or like, what is that? What's there?
I have an answer for this question. I think like an important thing, like kind of, it's a culmination of what we were all saying. What Alba was saying about, making sure that you guys are like both listening and being vulnerable is really important. And also, I think just starting small, like what Asar said in the very beginning about like crushes and talking about that and making that a normalized experience is really important because I feel like I would be, if I'm putting myself back into like the perspective of a teen who hasn't had these conversations before, I would want to start off easing myself into the conversation and building that relationship with my parent around those subjects. So talking about crushes in a normalized way is an easy way to, kind of broach that subject. And then also just telling them, like making sure they understand that if they have questions, like you are there, you are always going to be there, you are always ready to talk to them. And even if you start a conversation with your teen and there may not be like they might not be super engaged, or they're trying to like laugh it off or something like that, just know that like a lot of the time they are going to be curious about what you're saying. And so even though it may not seem like they're like super engaged, whatever you're saying has a real impact on them.
Yes, thank you so much, Angelina. Desiree or Asar, Alba, I see you.
Yeah. I would love to jump on this question. Definitely, I think those of y'all who are parents of younger kids have an advantage here, because I want to go back to what Desiree was saying in the second question. I believe ending that cycle of awkwardness starts from a young age. all of the youth talked about normalizing that, right? So there are things that you can do when kids are young to normalize and have like an openness about these conversations. So teaching younger kids the proper names for body parts, the medical terms, can normalize the words. If something comes up on TV or on social media, casually but informatively talking about those and answering the way that we do about other things when kids are young. You know, kids are there's a lot of kids who are very much like, why? Really take advantage of that and answer why. I know it may not be easy to, you know, you can't just answer questions the way you might to an adult or a high schooler, but there are ways to be able to answer them honestly and still age appropriately. So definitely look into that. Huckleberry is a great place to come if you want to have conversations and ask some questions about that. But if your child is a teen, it's not too late. There's ways, like they're saying, to normalize it in our everyday life. So if you know that they're super into a show, maybe put it on the living room TV and watch it with them, and maybe something comes up and you can turn that into a conversation about normalizing things. Take every opportunity if something comes up in school to be supportive and open about a topic, versus shutting it down or immediately being like, oh, you shouldn't be watching that, or you shouldn't be doing that. It's very normal for people to be curious, and there's still a way to, I believe, like, let young people watch age appropriate things, but also respect the fact that they're curious and they want to learn. And media is something we're never going to be able to escape at this point. So using it in a way, right, where you can help that nurture your conversations. And then exactly what the young folks are saying, never being pushy, but you just being a person who maybe starts a conversation here about, you know, maybe your body or something, like going to the gynecologist, for example, as a mother. That's something that I know that my mom would talk about, doing breast exams because breast cancer may run in our family, or just going to the gynecologist and explaining what a gynecologist is and understanding that it's important for me to learn about my vaginal health and my breast health. Those kinds of things that I know some of my peers never got the chance to learn about just helped me, like, get in touch with my body and learn to take care of it. And honestly, like, open the door for me to be a sex educator today. So being a listener, and there's a lot of ways to normalize these things.
That's so great. Thank you so much, Alba. No pressure. Desiree or Asar, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I did have an idea about, I don't know about your specific situation, but me personally, I love a story. So really similar to what Alba was saying, maybe start off with a story, or be like, you want to hear a story or something like that. And maybe not, have it be so obvious that it's going to lead to a sexual and health education place. Maybe like, I don't know, my first crush or something, or like my first boyfriend or first serious relationship, and then kind of ease them down the path until you get to your teaching experience. Well, not teaching experience, but yeah, the moment in your story where it becomes a learning experience. That's what I was thinking of. It's kind of not tricking them, but easing them into it, so they're not so, like, oh, I can already tell this is about sex. I'm not having it, drawing them in and then turning it into a learning experience. And that they might be a little more open to that than just, sex talk. But also, I don't know how you're going about it, but yeah.
Yes, these are gems. I'm loving all of this. Thank you so much. No pressure, Desiree. Do you want to add? You don't have to add.
Well, like, how, like, I'm thinking is, like, when they're trying to approach their, like, young person, they're like, oh, let's talk about sex. It's like, because it's like, obviously it's like, if you're not actually, like, having, like, a proper place where they're comfortable at, or, like, just like how Asar was saying, like, you, me, sex talk right now, I don't care what you're doing, like, it's like, you gotta, like Asar said, like, or like Alba said, like, you start slow, maybe a story time. Don't be like, oh yeah, we're gonna have a story time about, like, sex education. Like, it's just like, you kind of start slow and then you make it into, like, a lesson about, like, maybe, like, something about life, and, like, maybe you mention about, like, oh yeah, this is what I did during your age, and, like, it was scary, but, like, I dealt with it, I was your age, and this, so definitely it's like I feel like, not because all, like, I know I said, like, adults have to come out their own comfort zone, but it's also we have to try to also come out our own comfort zone. So it's like, it really depends. So
Yes, thank you so much, Desiree. Okay, we got one more, and it's just kind of an open question for anybody, and it's a little bit easier. And the question is, what is your favorite sex ed fact? Ooh, Angelina.
I have one. It's not a very like nice fact, I guess, but I just like when I saw that question, I was like, I want to answer this. I think it was really interesting. In health class, we learned about pornography literacy. So we learned like what the pornography industry like looks like and how you can like consume pornography in a healthy way that's like not supporting, like child abuse in any way or like making sure you're not watching stuff that's like human trafficking. Um, I think we did a presentation in class, me and a partner, and we did about how racism is like a big part in uh, pornography in the pornography industry, and it was really interesting to learn how the discrimination, how people get paid differently based on race, how there's like a divide, and there's certain categories within uh, porn and like different genres of porn that are like a white woman with a black man. And one thing that I found like shocking was that white women who who do porn with a black man usually do this like later on in their career because it's considered like risky for their career, but they get paid more because of it, because it's like a risky thing to do. I just think that like those things that we learned in class were like very, very informative. It's so sad to think that like that power imbalance is just so like divided. But it was really important to learn about that, because if we ever do decide to consume porn, like we need to have that in the back of our minds so we're not like consuming like racism without even knowing it.
Yes. Thank you so much, Angelina. How about you, Desiree or Asar? What is one of your favorite sex ed topics?
Okay, mine might be a little basic, but I feel like I really like talking or like learning and talking about like STDs, STIs, AIDS, and like, anything, because it's like it's not like it's so intriguing, not just because it's like, oh, how do you get it? It's like, where did it even origin from, or like how did it even start? Like that's what is really intriguing to me. And like it's like, I don't know, it's something that like people are like, it's like, you learn it, you gotta know it, but it's like you don't like, people don't really find it interesting because it's a little TMI. But I think like talking about that or like knowing that is really interesting.
Yeah, I'd have to say the same thing. My favorite fact, that helped me remember, because I love like telling my friends this, and I'm a super advocate for like getting tested for STDs and STIs, because most of them don't have symptoms right away. You will be living with it for like months. You'll never know. You'll just be walking around, having interactions with other people, giving it to them willy-nilly, like, oh, I don't have bumps or a rash or anything, so I'm just like totally fine. I don't even need to get tested. You need to get tested like before and after every time, or you're going to get something or give somebody something, because you'll never know. In most cases, you won't have symptoms until like years later. And then if it's not treated that far, of a time of having it, then it becomes like a serious problem to like your health and possibly others. I don't know. That's great, but get tested. It's my favorite part.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
So, if I'm not wrong, I believe that like men are like less likely to actually figure out that they do have a STD or STI comparing to women, because like for women, like we do have yeast infections and everything, so our body's telling us that something's wrong. But for men, it's like, like if they see something, it's like Yeah. So like definitely get tested. That's really important before and after, or even just for like just to be safe. Like it's scary.
Yeah, I will say there are anatomical differences as to how susceptible people can be to certain infections. For example, UTIs, people who have vaginas are more likely to get them because the urethra is shorter versus someone with a penis. So I just wanted to say you're onto something, Desiree. And you guys can basically do my job for me. So I'm out the door. Thank you guys so much. Tell everyone to get tested. I don't have a favorite subject, but I did want to say something that I think is unexpected from my experience talking to other educators, that my favorite workshop to teach is pleasure, because it's not something that I think young folks expect that they're going to be taught in a school environment. And I think people sometimes think that it's not appropriate, but it is, and it's something that's really important aspect of sex if people decide to have it. It's also a really important part of boundary learning and boundary setting. It's a really important part of consent, and it can really make a difference between somebody having a positive versus negative experience when they're having sex. So that's my favorite topic to teach.
Yes, I love that. That's absolutely true. I mean, we know a lot. When you're learning about sex through experience, and what you're learning is that it's painful, it's hard, there's challenges to it, and that's what your idea of sex is. If you don't know that sex is supposed to be or can be pleasurable, you can have a very skewed idea of what sex is even like at all. So I agree, really, really important, and a sort of new topic, I think, for teaching in high schools around pleasure. So I'm really excited to see curriculum kind of growing and changing in that way. Well, we are just about here at time. So I want to take a second to thank our panelists so much. They have put in so much work, both after school. They worked on the weekends. They did so much to make this possible. We are really, really grateful for the time that you've given us, but also for your expertise. I've learned a lot from all three of you, and I really, really appreciate your bringing everything that you brought to this. I also want to give a huge shout out to Alba, who has been my partner in crime in this. All of her hard work is how this all happened. So I just want to say thank you to Alba, and also wish her happy trails as she is transitioning out of her role at Huckleberry to something even bigger and better. So it's been great to be able to work so closely with you on this. And I also want to give a big thanks to our behind the scenes team. So Julia and Alondra and Doug, they were what made everything tonight go so smoothly. So I want to say thank you to them as well. And finally, I want to thank our audience. I hope that you found tonight's discussion to be helpful and insightful, and that you feel like you are ready to help the young people in your life learn and grow and become the brilliant adults that we know that they will be. Thank you again for joining us in celebrating 30 years of adolescent health services at Huckleberry, and I hope I'll get to see some of you at the gala on October 1st. Thank you so much, and good night.